Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network. I'm Lee Hutchison, back again. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at /The Nerd Party, at Join Nerd Party on Twitter, and at thenerdparty.com. So, joining me today on the pod phone is John Tenuto. John is a sociology professor who studies Star Trek fans and its cultural effects. He and his wife, fellow sociology professor Maria Jose, have written for Star Trek, the official magazine, StarTrek.com, and they have contributed to the recent Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan expanded soundtrack release. John joins me to share his views on Star Trek Discovery's first season so far, and we reflect on the characters, stories, behind-the-scenes talent, and where the second half of the season will go. Thank you so much to John for joining me on this episode, and I hope you'll enjoy our chat. I had such a great time listening to John, and he's been someone I've admired and respected for a long time, and I hope you'll enjoy our talk as much as I enjoyed listening. Now, engage. Thank you very much for joining me today, John. So just tell us a little bit about your Star Trek background, because you're kind of in quite a unique position. I can consider you a bit of a Star Trek historian.
Oh, well, thank you. I've been a fan, since I was a young person, since I was a little kid. I was introduced to Star Trek really through the reruns in the 1970s, and then really it captured my imagination in the early 70s, and I've stayed with it throughout my whole life. I actually majored in sociology in part because I enjoyed the science fiction social themes of Star Trek, and I think that in a way, science fiction and sociology deal with many of the same kinds of issues, particularly Star Trek. And so it seemed like a natural fit, and then I went on and became a sociology professor. And my specialization, I work with my wife, who also teaches sociology at the College of Lake County with me. We study the making of Star Trek. Really, our goal is to celebrate the contributions of the behind-the-scene artists and how they were able to make Star Trek despite the limitations they had of time and money and special effects technology, even censorship, and all the kinds of limitations that were on these artists, yet they were able to produce something that's really, a modern worldwide mythology. So we really admire the behind the scenes people in addition to the actors, and so we've been very fortunate during the last 15 years or so. We've been able to look at the archives of some of the really important contributors to Star Trek and look at photographs. We collected about 800 photographs from the Wrath of Khan that had never been seen before, thanks to Nicholas Meyer's collection of resources and just scripts and memos. And we're trying to sort of piece together really what made Star Trek special through the contributions of the artists.
And what kind of things have you kind of learned about, like, for example, you're talking about discovering all this trove of information through Nicholas Meyer. What's been one of the big things that we all think, especially Star Trek fans, there's nothing that will ever surprise us and shock us? Has there ever been something you thought, oh my God, this changes everything?
Well, we were really fortunate. CBS and Paramount were very kind to allow us permissions to photocopy certain things that some of the library collections were skittish to allow researchers to photocopy, we really felt we needed to photocopy them because we needed to live with them and look at them for a long time, not just at the library, which anybody can kind of go in and look at these things, but we really wanted to sort of be able to look at them and put sheets of paper next to each other. So one of the things that we found that we were really excited to find out about. We admire Ricardo Montalban. We love him as a person. Every year I read his autobiography from 1980. I assign it to my students to read. He's just a remarkable person, an activist, and human being and talent, and we miss him very much. And so we've always sort of had a special fascination for Wrath of Khan and Space Seed. And so we were very curious about why Ricardo Montalban would have been cast in that role, not because of a question of his talent or anything, but when you really look at the early documents of Kerry Wilbur's initial pitch and then his initial screenplay and Gene Kuhn's screenplay, and Gene Roddenberry eventually is the one who really makes it all work in an uncredited rewrite that he did, and all the permutations of who Khan was, beginning with the original conception of the character is more like a Viking, blonde-haired Viking, and his name was Ragnar Thorwald at one point, and it was John Harrison and John Erickson and Harold Erickson, and there were all these different names, but in no permutation was the character, sort of ethnically or culturally Khan, and we started to piece together this paperwork, and what we discovered through both the documents and also interviewing people like Joe D'Augusta, who was the casting director, was that Roddenberry was always willing to change character backgrounds to fit an actor. He believed in actors being hired on merit, and then you would wind up with a diversity of representation that way. So a role might have been written for a man, but if a woman was really right for it as an actor, then the character could be rewritten. And that's exactly what happened with Khan. Khan became Khan to fit at least closer to Ricardo Montalban's physicality and his background. Obviously, he's not Middle Eastern, but this is the 60s, so they went with a very different sort of ethnicity for the character. So we were really happy to find that out and to find out how Ricardo Montalban's casting altered that role.
And I'm curious as well, like you talk about like introducing sort of Star Trek to your students through books and kind of some of the archive footage. What is the reaction of your average student these days when people mention Star Trek? How do they meet that sort of material?
Well, I think the J.J. Abrams films really helped to put Star Trek into the consciousness of younger people. So, there was a period of time there, maybe 10, 15 years ago, where if you mentioned Star Trek in class, you didn't get the kind of recognition factor that you did 10 years before, like when I first started teaching. And so the J.J. Abrams films really kind of brought at least the broad strokes of Star Trek back to students. That's always a challenge with students, because it's not like when I was a kid or when I was going to school in grammar school or even in college. I mean, there weren't as many entertainment choices. So we all kind of spoke the same popular culture language. Now, the culture is so customized that it's difficult to find things that you can use in class as an example and kind of all the students get it. So I tend to stick with classic things like Superman. I mean, maybe they know the new Superman versus the old, but it doesn't matter, because the idea is, here's an example to help you understand the sociology. And so I tend to stick with things like that. And Star Trek, really because of J.J. Abrams films, it wound up with another life among younger people. And now some of my students are actually going back and watching the originals and getting into Star Trek a little bit because of those films. So that was useful to me as a teacher. I want to thank J.J. Abrams and Justin Lin for doing that.
Absolutely. And obviously, we've spoke about the past 15 years. Sort of Star Trek, a lot of people say its natural home is on TV, and now it's finally back on TV in a way, sort of through streaming. So obviously, it felt like it's taken years for Star Trek Discovery to get to this point. What was kind of your feelings when Star Trek Discovery was starting to be announced, from people like Brian Fuller and Nicholas Meyer, who we talked about? What was your feeling sort of through this long process of the show kind of coming together? I know I was excited with some of the names. How was it for you?
Oh, it was. I mean, it was delightful. Everything about the announcement. Even eventually the announcement of the name. I thought the name of the show was a perfect name for Star Trek. The idea of discovery and I don't know necessarily. I'm very happy with the show, but this season's arc anyway isn't so much about discovery. I think in the traditional Star Trek sense, they haven't been going to too many new worlds, But there may be a different kind of discovery going on, and maybe in future seasons they'll get into that a little bit more. But I think it was a perfect name. Certainly Brian Fuller I think we all knew him as a fellow fan who made good, and was able to contribute in Star Trek in a meaningful way through shows like Voyager. And when they started announcing that Eugene Roddenberry and Trevor Roth were being brought in, I appreciated that almost from a symbolic point of view, that sort of there would be a Roddenberry connection to this show, and certainly I don't think there's very many people that are as important, in terms of the sort of the pantheon of Star Trek. I mean, I believe that everyone from the people who build the sets to the musicians in the orchestra, every single person who contributed to Star Trek is valuable. But of course, there are people who really play a central role in making Star Trek what it is, and one of those is Nicholas Meyer. I don't know that we'd be talking about Star Trek Discovery if he didn't do what he did with Wrath of Khan, from reworking and making that script into what it was, to directing it. I think they were at a crossroads with Star Trek II, and it was either going to go one way or the other, and luckily it went the right way, with him at the helm and with Harve Bennett, and with the contributions of the actors. So to have Nicholas Meyer associated with Star Trek again in any way is like a dream for me as a fan and as a researcher. So I was very, very excited, and I was excited as a parent. I'm a little bit disappointed in the amount of sort of graphicness of Discovery. On the one hand, I understand it, and if it's necessary for the story, I think it's always okay, but I kind of wish, I'm okay, my kid is old enough. I would be disappointed if our kid was a little younger, because I don't know that I could show him Star Trek Discoveries. But as a parent, I was very happy that there would be a Star Trek on TV that I could watch every week with my son, like I did with my father.
Yeah, like I think Nicholas Meyer, when he was announced, I think that was the one where with like Brian Fuller, that you thought, oh, that's a perfect match, and then Nicholas Meyer to almost come out of the cold and sort of his Star Trek involvement had me kind of popping the champagne, as it were. And it's still surreal when you see the credits. There's Nicholas Meyer's name on the sheet. Like, obviously you've worked with Nicholas Meyer. Did you have much communication with him kind of in the build up to Star Trek Discovery, and how he kind of ended up involved in this project?
Well, he's Nicholas Meyer has always been very, very kind in giving us permissions to do either talks or he answers questions of us. Our communications have only ever been over email, although we've been in the same place at the same time. Sometimes we were at Star Trek Missions New York. My wife and I were giving a tribute talk to Leonard Nimoy, and we were also giving our presentation on Wrath of Khan, but unfortunately that was when Nicholas Meyer was on stage, and so we never get a chance to I would always love to meet him and thank him for the help that he's given us remotely. But always I would never presume to ask him. I mean, I as a fan, there's nothing I'd like more than to ask him, "Are you working on this Khan series that we keep hearing about?" But I know I wouldn't get an answer anyway, so I try to keep my questions limited. His time is valuable, and we try to limit it to questions about people's contributions or ideas, or I occasionally send him a thank you or something like that. But I do hope, I have no knowledge at all of this, but I certainly hope that the rumors that he's working on a Khan show are true. I would think it makes sense. There needs to be many weeks on CBS All Access that need to be filled by Star Trek in addition to Discovery. I would imagine that that's certainly part of the plan, at least them thinking about what the plan is, would include having either mini-series or one-off series, or short-lived 6-episode, 8-episode types of shows to carry us from February until whenever season 2 starts, or from the second to the third season. I mean, people are kind of sad that we have to wait 6 weeks for the next episode, but imagine what our wait's going to be for season 2.
Absolutely.
So,
and we waited 15 years. What's 6 weeks? So and a Christmas in between.
That's how I feel a lot. So I'm hopeful. I mean, he has said he's working on a Star Trek project, and he did hint in a Trek movie interview that it possibly could be a TV show, may not be, could be a book. Who knows? We don't know. So. I'm really hopeful about that. But even if he's not, I'm really grateful that he had a hand in serving as a consulting producer on Star Trek Discovery. I hope that there's scripts that could eventually come from him for the show. I don't know if any of this season's scripts are. I know initially there was talk that there were going to be episodes written by him.
Yeah, I think the second episode, sort of Battle of the Binary Stars, I think that was originally linked to him, if I recall.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if some of those plans fell apart as Brian Fuller left the project, or maybe I'm hoping that Mr. Meyer is really busy writing his own scripts for Khan.
When you kind of look at sort of the first 9 episodes, sort of from a kind of you could class you almost as a Nick Meyer expert. What kind of little touches do you sort of associate thinking, oh, I can almost him having the guiding hand there? That for me, I always think of in Context is for Kings. I think was that I've lost track which episode where they discussed the Alice in Wonderland book. For me, kind of Nick Meyer calling upon literary subjects, books, quotations, that for me screamed Nicholas Meyer, whereas a lot of people thought, oh, that's more Brian Fuller. I was thinking it was Nick Meyer. What kind of touches do you kind of notice and think that's definitely a Nick Meyer influence?
Well, I think, especially with Captain Philippa, I don't know, what kind of role was specifically played, but Captain Giorgio, Philippa Giorgio, to me, she was just such a great character. I have a hope for Discovery. I don't know, it's my own little fan theory, but I hope that there's more from her that is possible. And to me, she's just such a great character, and her sense of humor, her kind of charm. To me, that's what Nicholas Meyer did best with the original films that he worked on, was bringing a sense of charm back to Star Trek, and in fact amping that charm up, having characters relate to each other in a very human way, but inherent to who they were. So we have Uhura, seeing her actually working humorously, but working translational function in Star Trek 6, or the kind of material he wrote for Scotty in Star Trek 4. Obviously, any kind of interchange between Kirk and Spock, whether it's in 2 or 6, just delightful kind of banter, and that these people genuinely liked each other, and that they enjoyed being with each other, and that was very much, I think, of the feeling of the Vulcan Hello episode, and I kind of felt like that might have been some Nicholas Meyer influence there, particularly with that character of Giorgio. But yes, I think anytime you have any sort of intelligence in Star Trek, like some sort of cleverness, that always kind of goes back to the writers, I think, and whether it was Nicholas Meyer or the other writers, the genius of kind of bringing in literature to Star Trek again, always welcome, because that really wasn't in the J.J. Abrams universe. That element of kind of the literature aspect of Star Trek, kind of its connection to classic literature, wasn't really there. It didn't quite fit. So I'm glad to see it back, and I would think that Nicholas Meyer certainly, if he didn't inspire it directly on this one, he inspired it through his previous uses of Shakespeare or Tale of Two Cities.
Absolutely. And then obviously kind of in the build up to the show coming out, one of the big controversies was with Star Trek, everyone thinks we've got this entire universe to play with, and they obviously decided to sort of nuzzle it in sort of the Prime Universe 10 years before the original series. And obviously there was some talk that it could be an anthology series, it could be this, it could be that. What was your thoughts and kind of your reaction to this is the sort of show, this is where it's going to be set, and this is where it's going to be based? Were you happy with that? A bit frustrated? Where did you kind of come to it?
Well, I'm not a big fan of arc-based television, and the reason is because I think, it can be done well. Certainly, there are examples of it done well, and if anybody can do it well, I think it's a lot of the people that are working on Star Trek right now. But I think the big problem with arc-based is that the arc often there's an overemphasis on the arc and not on character. So you could take a show like, I think, Flash or Arrow, and you can't necessarily recognize the characters season to season. It's almost like whatever the narrative needs that season is how the characters are, and that's always a big danger, I think, with arc-based shows. And so when I heard it was going to be arc-based, I was, of course, a little bit concerned. But when you hear who's involved in it, I wasn't as concerned, because I think Brian Fuller and Nicholas Meyer and Gretchen Berg and the people who work on Star Trek right now, they can handle arc-based television, I think. But I did like the idea of an anthology-based show, because I think that was something that would have been fresh and interesting. Every season being a different time period, it would have given those of us who hunger for what happens post Nemesis, an answer, a canon answer, and so I would have liked to have seen that. I think that's still possible. I can't see why, if Discovery continues to be as successful as it is, that there can't be one-off. We could get a Worf. Why not get a Worf television movie? Why not? I mean, it's unlimited. Only by budget, I guess, and perhaps a concern of oversaturation. But if we're going to get 15 or 20 episodes of Discovery each year, that's still a lot of weeks where you don't get anything. And those weeks can be filled with different time periods and showing us different things, and maybe bringing back some original actors to revisit characters from the past. But I was a little bit concerned. I kind of want to see how this plays out. I have I can be, knowing this, I want to say this so my fellow fans don't think I'm crazy, but I can totally be wrong, and I probably am wrong. But I just think maybe we're not in the Prime universe yet.
Interesting. Yeah, everyone seems to. I think that's one of the things that's kind of exciting about this sort of the way they've gone with the storytelling, is that everyone has sort of theories, and like, oh, is this set then? Is this a Section 31 ship? Many of these different ideas, and I think that's quite exciting in a Star Trek show, really. Because I think with, say, maybe like the Next Generation, Voyager and such like that, everything's all happily wrapped up after 40 minutes. You sort of know where you started, you know where you finished. And with it does keep you second guessing. And with episodes like the mid-season finale yesterday, you're like, right, where's this going to end in 45 minutes time? And I find that quite exciting in a way with Star Trek.
Sure, it makes Star Trek, and it certainly makes every Sunday here and Monday throughout the world almost like an event, because you are wanting to know what happens. It really is like a chapter in a book that you're enjoying, and you want to read the next chapter, but you got to go to work, and you got to leave the book behind. And so I think that's kind of a brilliant. I mean, I think wondering about Vok and whether Vok and Tyler are the same character, or is Admiral Cornwall eventually going to become Lethe? Is this an alternate universe, and then now they're going to jump to the Prime universe? Those kinds of questions are fun, certainly fun to think about, and make the week-long wait, really exciting. And in a way, we didn't really have, we had Facebook in a very rudimentary way, when Enterprise was on, towards the end, but we didn't have a lot of the social media, and it certainly wasn't that big of a presence in our life. And so the ability to interact with fellow fans and podcasts and everything, just that makes it more interesting to talk about, because we week to week we're questioning what's going to happen.
I think what's quite exciting as well with sort of the social media is kind of the creative talents involved as well, whether it's the Star Trek writers' Twitter account, Nicholas Meyer's dog, and sort of the cast and the directors sharing photos. I think it's Ted Sullivan, I probably got it wrong. He's sharing a lot of behind-the-scenes photos after an episode airs, and it's so insightful. You go on Instagram and you discover like people like, what's her name? Kayla Detmar, the lieutenant on the bridge with the shaved head. You see her having viewing parties. It's really quite exciting to see how everyone sort of is meeting Star Trek behind the scenes and as fans. I think it's quite exciting what social media is doing for it. Obviously, there's people will complain as always, but I think the social media with Discovery has been really positive, and I think that's a huge success.
It's funny. One of the bits of research we were doing a few years ago, and we've been sharing. My wife and I write a couple columns for StarTrek.com each. Every month or so, our columns appear, and we're working on one right now, which is going to look at the results of this research, which was, in a way, even though they didn't have social media in the '60s, the actors and behind-the-scenes people at Star Trek really didn't. I think in a way we're breaking ground in how interactive they were with fans, and so whether it was through fanzines like Spockanalia, particularly Spockanalia, which was sort of one of the first, really in a way the first important fanzine. The actors would write back to fans, and through that fanzine. The fanzine was around the 1960s Star Trek sets at Desilu, and Roddenberry would write. DC Fontana would write. They would answer questions and they would connect. And obviously, it's much more immediate in today's world. But I'm really happy to see that because, and it's been of course taken to the next level with social media because it's so instantaneous and you can have a conversation back and forth. I think that's great that the actors and the behind-the-scenes people working on Star Trek Discovery are continuing that tradition, because I think Roddenberry and the early sort of behind-the-scenes people realized the importance of fans to Star Trek, and that their connection to the show was a genuine and meaningful connection, and that they had something to contribute as fans through their ideas and their feedback. And Roddenberry recognized that, and I'm really happy that the actors and the writers and producers are also doing that in the modern world with the modern technology we have.
Yeah, I think we always think of, was it Billy Blackburn who had the treasure chest that ended up on the Blu-ray? He was a supporting actor, and there we saw him kind of filming behind the scenes and sort of the crowds and mixing with the extras. I always think that's almost sort of a companion to that, what they were doing in the 60s.
Absolutely, it's great. You can, as a fan, you can let the actor know perhaps what you thought of their performance and or what you think of their character. And I was most surprised when they first announced Paul Stamets. I was, I liked engineering characters. Of course, everyone likes Scotty,
Mm-hmm.
but I've always been kind of either kind of a captain's person or that kind of. I've been gravitate towards those kinds of characters. But to me, and when they initially described Paul Stamets as something with mushrooms, and you're like, what is this, what is this about? And how is it engineer and he's got mushrooms? I don't know.
Everyone's thinking that's definitely a Brian Fuller pick.
Yeah, fungus expert. It's like, okay, but boy, what a great character. And really, my favorite character, who I think out of all the characters, with the exception of Michael Burnham, really has acted the most courageously. And I think taking even Michael out, has acted with the most conscience and with the most concern and compassion, even though he kind of starts off gruff, gruff as a character. I think he's a really great, character. So to be able to say to Anthony Rapp, wow, here's a character who on paper initially looks like this kind of, fungus expert, and how exciting can that be? And to have him be what I think is really a great standout character on the show. And to be able to tell them that, I appreciate that as a fan. I certainly like to hear if someone likes what you're doing, and I think it is really appreciated by fans that we get to have this kind of interactivity.
Yeah, and I think Anthony Rapp he summed up all along for me about why he's almost sort of living our dream in a way. That I remember when he was cast, and then there he was on Twitter saying, "Oh my God, I'm going to be in Star Trek." And I always remember, I think he was doing a play in London, and he was posing with all 7-season box sets of The Next Generation, all 3 of the original series, the movie box set, and he's like, and then for like months he was tweeting like, "I've just watched Chain of Command, Patrick Stewart's incredible," and he's interacting with some of the older cast members, and you thought, I'm so jealous of you right now. Like it must be such a surreal experience to be watching these episodes and thinking, wow, I'm going to be in it, and interacting with fans before anyone's even seen you in a clip.
Yeah, and such a different, such a different world. Even from 2009 and when we had the last spate of a new sort of Star Trek and a new group of actors coming in, the world has changed really so drastically in terms of communication ability within the last just couple of years, and people's familiarity and comfortableness with social media that it's so much more prevalent and easy to access and to share with fellow fans and with the behind the scenes people. I remember when they announced Zachary Quinto as an actor in Star Trek, we had wrote a letter, so that shows you the technology changing, and we just said, just as fans, really how much we love Spock and we wish him luck and everything. And we got a letter back from him on his stationery, which was really wonderful. And he had said that he got our letter the day he signed the contract to play Spock, and that he saw it as a good omen, and he wanted to thank us for sending us the letter and everything. And that is such a great to me, that was a great interaction, and it only makes you want to root for that actor or root for the character even more, when they can show that kind of kindness back to their fans and the fans show the kindness to them. I think that's great.
What did you think of the rest of sort of the main cast? Sonika, Martin Green, Doug Jones, Shazad Latif, and Mary Wiseman and Jason Isaac. What's been sort of your reaction to their roles and sort of their casting? I mean, I think when Jason Isaacs and Michelle Yeoh were cast, I just couldn't believe it. Like, Jason Isaacs is a staple of British TV over here, and to see him in one of my favourite franchises just was unbelievable, and I think he's been fantastic so far. And for Doug Jones, I'm so used to him in Del Toro movies. He's this brilliant actor, and it was like, wow, he's actually going to get to be sort of a star now. He's not just going to be some sort of background actor. He's going to be, front and center. Like, obviously, I hadn't seen Walking Dead really, so Martin Green was sort of an unknown element to me. Much the same with Latif and Wiseman. What was it like for you with the casting?
Same. In many ways, these were some of the actors were known and some are unknown, and that's pretty familiar. That's pretty, same thing happened with Enterprise. Everybody was kind of familiar maybe with Scott Bakula, and but not necessarily with some of the other actors or actresses on the show. And that I think has been a tradition. Star Trek has always had, I think, some of the best actors. They aren't always recognized, and they should be. By the industry, I think, but whether it's Patrick Stewart or Jerry Ryan or Kate Mulgrew or William Shatner, obviously Leonard Nimoy, right? I mean, just the incredible actors that they have working on Star Trek. I think they're always good at casting, and I think that this show fits right into that. I don't find anybody's performance to be anything but engaging, and in fact, they're often heartbreaking. I mean, I think Shazid Latif's performance this last episode of the season, I mean, that's an Emmy performance. I mean, that was an incredible, moving, and it's meaningful too. I mean, especially as many countries are dealing with soldiers returning home, from the recent wars, and really dealing with that issue and what that's like to experience torture or abuse or war, that kind of thing. And the way he performed that, both when he was with Cornwell performing the actual attack that he was getting, the PTSD, and then his performance afterwards, his vulnerability when he was with Michael, I thought was fantastic. It's kind of interesting because it's hard to say. I always wonder, like, who really is. I mean, in many ways, obviously, Michael Burnham is the central character of the show, but they spend a lot of time with Lorca, and they spend a lot of time, as I think any good ensemble show does, with other characters. Doug Jones was able to have a really great amount of screen time in the last episode and before this one, and I think that. It's really nice to be able to have that sort of showcase where you have a main character like Michael which I think Shaniqua Martin Green is just, she fits right in as a heroic but flawed. So I'm be interested to see where she winds up at the end of 7 years or however many years, because there's always that question when you look at her, like I think it's unfair that she's been labeled what she's been labeled by Starfleet.
Yeah.
I think in some ways nothing that she did really contributed to starting that war. I mean, she defended herself against the torchbearer, but who wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, she killed the torchbearer, but she needed to defend herself, right? So that's not an issue. And her mutiny that she occurred really was kind of less severe than what Spock did, in the Menagerie.
Yeah.
It
was a mutiny that all seemed to last all but 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, she was up and at him. And so it wasn't like because of that, Captain Georgia was out of the picture, and then therefore a series of events happened, and therefore Michael is to blame. The mutiny lasted like you said, a minute. So, I think she's sort of being blamed for starting the war by Starfleet, but it's unfair. So I don't know if the resolution is going to be Starfleet kind of realizing that. Mm-hmm. and kind of giving her back her commission or whatever. But it's interesting to have a character who's really not wearing, not fully wearing the uniform, so to speak, right? I mean, she doesn't have a comm badge, and she's a specialist, and she's lost her rank, and so that's a very interesting, and the way she plays that, and the range of emotion that we've seen, I think, just demonstrates what a great actress that Sonequa Martin Green is. She was very unlikable, I thought, in context for Kings, because she didn't like herself,
mm-hmm.
And I thought, what a great performance, right? You see her, and she feels like she's irredeemable, and her situation, there's no redemption for her, and you sort of feel that way. And then little by little, she adds layers to that character again, and you go, wow, she's a great character, and she's a great person, and she, and you start to feel back that feeling you felt with her when you first met her in Vulcan Hello. And I thought, that's great acting.
And with like Vulcan Hello and Battle of the Binary Stars, that Star Trek pilots have a somewhat mixed reputation at times. Where did you feel that sort of pilot when you watched those 2 hours on Netflix or CBS All Action? How did you feel going into that? Because it's difficult sometimes for us as fans. We have lifetimes of pressure or thoughts and opinions, or it's hard not to compare. What was it like for you on that first night when you watched that double bill?
Well, it was funny because I, very, very excited, of course, all day long, just waiting for it to start. And, we got a bit of a delay here in the U.S. because of football. And that was an interesting experience, because I did want to watch it actually on CBS the first hour. They showed it on network TV, and I wanted to have that feeling of watching a Star Trek on network television again, because we really hadn't had that feeling since Voyager and Enterprise on the UPN network. And so there was a great deal of anticipation, and we immediately rewatched the episodes the very next day, because there was so much to absorb, both visually, character-wise, dialogue-wise, and that's pretty unusual. I certainly watch. I probably watched every Star Trek episode, 8 times anyway, but never like immediately again. Too often, and we've been doing that with every episode. We revisit it again the very next day to kind of watch it and to kind of catch everything when they're doing the Klingon subtitles. You miss some of the acting, and so to enjoy it, we've been watching it again. And what I think's great is when I watched the first 2 episodes and then I rewatched them, I only appreciated it even more the second time. I loved it the first time, but the second time I was able to look for subtleties and really catch more things. And I was really impressed by the 2 openings. I was not surprised by the wallop punch they gave you in Context for Kings, mm-hmm. where it was in essence, those first 2 episodes were kind of like a fake out. They were a prologue, because you became so invested in those characters. especially Giorgio. I mean, I thought she was just right up there with Kirk and Picard as just one of the great Star Trek captains, and she established herself as that right away, and hopeful and brave and all the things that make a Star Trek captain, and in a way all the things that Lorca doesn't appear to be, or may be, but isn't in his own unique way. Those things, and so. I really loved that, and then it was almost like Context for Kings took the third episode. You had to make a complete shift because it was like a different show.
I always expected. I remembered at the end of the second hour when the Discovery's being pulled away, and I'm thinking, oh my God, here we go. We're finally going to introduce to the Discovery. No, it's the Europa, and it truly was that fake out that this is Discovery, and it's 2 hours, and before we're even getting to see it, so it's our third episode. I really liked that, and I think that's the joy of sort of this liberated television they've sort of got now, where we think of Voyager, everything was wrapped up within the first 2 hours. It's almost like, here's your first 2 hours, you ain't seen nothing yet, which I thought was such a promising way to start a series, and confident as well. And I thought it would be so easy after 15 years off TV to go, well, we'll play it sort of safe. We'll have the introduction to the cast and the crew, but to go, here's your first 2 hours, and you're not going to see the Discovery ship or 2/3 of the crew. I thought that was quite an exciting option.
It was great too, because there was enough in there, as you said, it was a lot that's new and exciting, and there was that but then there were things in there where you felt kind of familiar, or that there was a sort of a Star Trek vibe to it. I thought the opening, right after you're introduced to Tecumva, and he makes a speech where you see Michael and Captain Giorgio on this mission of a very Star Trek mission, right? To help people without them even knowing, to help another species without them even knowing that you're helping them necessarily, and to show sort of the kindness of Starfleet and the Federation. And I thought that was a great sort of opening moment, and it very sort of felt like that's what Star Trek was about. And I also like that they kind of continued the tradition in Star Trek pilots. So in each of the Star Trek pilots, except obviously the first 1960s show, but in Next Generation, you had Dr. McCoy as your bridge character. In the Emissary episode of Deep Space Nine, you have Picard as your bridge to Deep Space Nine, and then on Voyager you have Quark as your bridge to Voyager. So this sort of tradition, and in Enterprise you had Zefram Cochrane. I mean, every single Star Trek show has brought back a previous character from another incarnation as almost like a welcoming character to this new group of people, and kind of they send them on their way in many ways. And that was true in this too. You have Sarek, right, who serves as that bridge character.
And that's something I'd love to hear your thoughts on, like James Frayne as Sarek, and then Rainn Wilson as Harry Mudd. Obviously, the original series is something you're so passionate about. What did you think when they were first announced, and then what did you think of their appearances and the episodes that we've seen them in so far?
What's interesting is, in some ways, it's like Sarek seems like the Sarek we know. He's settled as a character, but that episode Lethe was brilliant, because what I thought was fantastic about that was it deepened our. We've always known that Spock and Sarek have had this animosity towards one another, and that there is this strain, and that strain really stems from partially Spock's rejection of the Vulcan Science Academy, and rather going into Starfleet, right? And that's part of Star Trek 2009. It's part of the original Star Trek TV show, but never really fully exploring that. And the brilliance, I thought, of the script for Lethe was that it fits so perfectly that you're like, now you know why Sarek had such profound disappointment in his son, because he had made that choice, he had a choice to make between his son and his sort of adopted foster daughter. And he chooses his biological son over his foster daughter in terms of their future. And then Spock says no to that, throwing away that, and Sarek kind of has to suffer with that choice that he made. And I thought, what a brilliant way to add to that character and to really deepen the original show in addition to Discovery. I thought that was really a great idea.
And it made me kind of think as well. I remembered like the talk when they made Sarek in the Next Generation that Rick Berman was really pushing against even the mention of Spock, and that it was this huge deal that they got to kind of even mention him at all, and when Picard was overcome with all that emotion, and then to see it sort of beautifully placed and subtle here, it was hard not to think about how far Star Trek's come in sort of embracing its history and acknowledging the other series that we almost take for granted these days in sort of television and comics, that it was just so beautifully put together, that moment, and I think it's almost one of the most overlooked episodes of the season so far.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, and he was great in it. I mean, I thought he was a really fantastic as Sarek. I'm always interested. We've had a couple conversations with Robin Curtis, and we were invited, my wife and I, to go up to Vulcan, Canada, last summer and give a talk to the town there. That they have a big, they're sort of the official Canadian Star Trek town, obviously. Amazing. With the name Vulcan. And Robin Curtis was there, and we spoke with her a lot there, and just through our interactions online with her. And one of the things that was, she had spoken about was how difficult it was to go against every bit of training you have as an actor when you play a Vulcan, because you're trained to emote, and how do you at how much can you emote as a Vulcan? There has to be some amount of emotion there, but it has to be always under the surface, and it really takes, I think, a special kind of actor to play a Vulcan. And that's why I think Sonequa Martin Green, in a way, she's walking that line, right? She's got the Vulcan influence, and she's sort of socially awkward. She's kind of like Seven of Nine in that she doesn't really understand fully what it means to be a human being, but she is one, and because she really has more of a Vulcan socialization, and so she's struggling with this, and characters like Ash and Tilly are helping her, and Captain Giorgio helped her kind of discover her humanity in a way, and so I really appreciate actors that can play Vulcans well, and I think James Frann is a great example of that. I mean, he's doing a great, I think, service to Mark Leonard and the original performance of Sarek that we had. What I find curious, though, and again, it kind of makes me lean towards that. I know that the show is going to be set in the Prime Universe, and is because they've said it is Prime Universe, but I'm not sure we're there yet. And one of the reasons is I could see how Spock could hide Sybok, right? You don't talk about a brother who is cast out of Vulcan. That's all kind of Vulcan business, you know what I mean? And he can keep that private and not reveal that to Kirk. But Michael Burnham would have to be, it's not even an opinion. We know this. She's galaxy-wide famous, right? We know that from Context is for Kings, and we know that from follow-up episodes that everyone in the galaxy seems to know that Michael Burnham was a traitor and is being branded as the person who starts this war. And so, I mean, in our world today, if we had a person like that, we'd all know about her background, right? So everyone would know that she's a ward of Sarek. That's not a secret. And so Kirk would know that Spock has a half adopted sister, or whatever you want to call her, half sister. It could not have been hidden by Spock. It would not have been possible. And that's one of the reasons that I think this may be an alternative universe we've been seeing for 9 episodes, and maybe now we're going to switch over to the Prime Universe, because I don't know how that can possibly be reconciled unless they just kind of not want us to not think about that, which I think they're too careful of a writers not to have thought about that concern.
Absolutely. And what did you think of when Harry Mudd, that it was sort of a bit of a left field turn when you logged onto Twitter one day and you saw Rainn Wilson's been cast as Harry Mudd? You're like, huh. What did you think of that casting and his appearances so far in Choose Your Pain and Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, some of the most kind of highly praised episodes of the series so far? What did you think about that in sort of the context of the original series and what we got?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in many ways, when you look at the careers of Rainn Wilson and you look at the careers of Roger Carmel, who played the roles originally, there is a kind of similarity there. Sort of this character actor, comedic actor, but there's a bit of a kind of an edge to the comedy and the characters that they've played. And I thought that Rainn Wilson was a perfect choice because of that. He was really I think very much in line with the spirit of who Roger Carmel was as an actor. And it's a different Mud. It's younger, right? I mean, if we presume we're in the Prime universe and this is the Mud we know, and he will grow up to be, I Mud that sort of con man kind of. The worst he is sort of a con man foil for Kirk. This is an interesting beginning to him because he's obviously much edgier and much more violent and willing to kill people. And we never got that from the Mud initially. So he, maybe Stella has a kind of an influence on him. Or the war has had an influence on him, right? He's living through this war and he's a survivor and he's going to do what it takes to survive. And so we get to see him, 10, 15 years later on the original Star Trek. So, but I think there's a lot in there that's recognizable, that kind of humor, that the playing with the captain, the not respecting authority. I think that they're playing that really, really well, and they've updated the character, I think, nicely for that for the show.
And kind of looking through, we've obviously got 9 episodes now. We're at the mid-season point. What's been some of your favourite episodes, highlights, or moments of the sort of first few months of Star Trek Discovery being back?
Well, gosh, there's just so many. There's such.
That's a great thing as well to say, isn't it? About in the first season, it's such a relief too.
Well, the one moment I didn't like, and I could talk about the ones I really did like, and I didn't like it because I think we were supposed to not like it. I'm still disturbed by it. What happened eventually to Giorgio, where they ate her?
Yeah.
It was so disturbing because I think I had read the David Mack book, which I think is sort of required reading for Discovery fans, and I got to know her even better in the book, and I certainly loved the performance that Michelle Yeoh gave in the 2 episodes that she was in, and then her cameo in the third episode. And so to find out that she was eaten is just it's upsetting. Although I think in the last episode, you get a little bit of satisfaction in that you get her badge back, her Delta shield back, and I think that that's sort of a restoration in a way of that. But I thought, I think that the moments that I've really been enjoying are seeing certain performances. I think Kenneth Mitchell as Cole is just really great. I think and in fact, I loved that they spoke English this episode.
Yeah.
Because and what a brilliant way to do it. Just this last episode was smart in so many ways. Very clever. The jumping 133 times, and it's just great stuff. And to keep that communicator open and allow us to hear it in English, it really gave us a chance to focus on the acting, and I thought that was great because we got to see how really good an actor all Mary Chieffo, all the Klingons are, and to act under that makeup. I really liked when I didn't like it, but I loved the pain of when Connor dies in Battle of the Binary Stars. I thought, what a fake out that was, right? Because you had the actor Sam Varthamios, I think is how you say his name. He was he was doing press and everything else, right? I mean, you just presumed he was going to port over like with Saru to the Discovery, and then to have him die the way that he did, and the acting that was there was just, I thought, a really great moment. And in many ways, it was the first moment where you go, "Ooh, this show is going to surprise me." There's going to be a lot of surprises here. I really enjoyed the last episode. I thought that was very, very clever. um, and how they kind of, I think in many ways it was where the characters acted the most like we would think Starfleet would act. It wasn't really so much about the war, even though it was about a mission. And there was a mission to complete, and they all kind of contributed based on their talents. I really like in Choose Your Pain when Saru uses his, what you could conceive of as a weakness, right? His fear and his knowledge of what it means to be a prey to rescue his captain, right? He's sort of analyzing the ships and how predators attack a prey. And I thought that was great because that just shows you that he has a lot more to him as a character and really has a great deal to contribute. And I think anything with Paul Stamets where he is being selfless, like when he, gives himself the tardigrade DNA and because he won't harm that creature anymore, I thought that was just really what Star Trek's all about, getting you to think about how we treat one another and how we treat the world. And I thought that was really, those are some of my favorite moments in the show.
Absolutely. And one of the things, I think what really kind of struck home for me was sort of in context for King, some of the criticisms of the show was that this crew, seems so unhappy. They don't seem, like the scientists that we know, even though this is wartime, this is going to be quite a difficult crew to like. And I think when I was watching Into the Forest I Go, and then Lorca's making that speech on the ship that we've all seen a captain do in Star Trek before, and it really, you're seeing where this crew have all kind of come together and they've overcome a lot of their difficulties with each other, their mission, and coming together to achieve a goal. And I thought, that's it. People have said this isn't Star Trek at points, but this is such pure Star Trek right here. And I thought that was such a great moment. We just got that moment with the crew coming together, and I thought, yeah, I'm so sold on this show.
Yeah, it's funny. There's sort of two points there. One is, I absolutely agree. I thought context for King, when I was watching it, I said to myself, well, I don't like anyone. I mean, initially, the very first person you really meet from the Discovery is Commander Landry, and she's just, she's talking to prisoners, of course, but she was not presented in a very likable way, right? Mm-hmm. And they're marching through the ship, and it's kind of, you got guards all around, and people with black badges on, and and you're just wondering what's going on, and the ship just, it seemed like you were in this, you really did sort of feel like you were in Alice in Wonderland, like in this kind of strange environment that wasn't recognizable as a Federation ship. But I think many of my experiences in terms of coming to grips with the show is seeing it as it's a different entity, right? It's not Star Trek. So it's not Star. I don't mean to say it's not Star Trek. I mean to say it's not Star Trek in the style we're used to, in the presentation we're used to. In other words, I think it's sort of like you have to take the 15 episodes we're getting this season, and that's an episode. Mm-hmm. Like that's how I'm thinking about it. So I've only seen, if we could make the 15 episodes an episode, I'm at a half an hour point in a regular Star Trek episode, right? Where I'm at halfway or a little past halfway, and we're nowhere near the resolution of the story. And so that's a very different kind of shift from other Star Trek. So, I mean, if you take a look at the Menagerie, right, you have Spock, and Spock commits an act of mutiny. He uses a Vulcan neck pinch, just like Michael Burnham does. He commandeers a ship, just like Michael does for at least a minute. She does, but he commandeers it for a much longer period of time. He brings a ship to what is known to be a planet with a death sentence for whoever goes there. He goes against the wishes of not only one captain, but two captains, right? He goes against what Pike is telling him not to do it, and he does it, and Kirk is trying to get him to stop doing it, and he won't do it. And if we stretched that episode out across 15 episodes instead of 2, it would have been in a completely different kind of an experience, I think, because we would only be at the point where maybe Spock's trial is starting, you know, on board the ship, and we don't know what's going on. And I think it's also difficult because it's been 12 years since we we don't know what's going to happen to characters in a way, right? I mean, all we've had is the J.J. Abrams films where after 2 hours you know what happened to the characters. We're done. The story is completed. And, before that, it was Enterprise, and you know, at the end, in 2005, you knew what the fate of all the characters were. And so we're in that phase where we don't know these characters really yet. And I think I don't want to rush it, right? Because, if we look at the first season of Next Generation, I didn't really know things about Picard or Riker or Troy like I would eventually know these characters. I mean, it takes time in any show to get to know characters and to connect with them. And I also think the way they're doing this, it's just one big giant episode. It's one big story. And so I'm going to let them tell the story, and I'm fully confident that the end resolution is going to be very Star Trek-ish, and I'm going to feel comfortable with it, whether it's because we're going to go to the Prime Universe and we're going to see them at the end of the season in the yellow, red, and blue shirts because they're stuck in that Prime Universe, or we are already in the Prime Universe, and we're going to follow these characters on another adventure next season that's not the war. I think we have to let them tell their story, and it's just we're in the middle of an episode right now is how I'm looking at it.
Absolutely, and it's been a great episode so far. I mean, even for me, I've only had sort of some minor quibbles. I almost feel something that they're underdoing is this when they talk in context is for kings. We see this on board the ship. We have 300 different scientific experiments going on at one time. I'd love to maybe see a little bit more of that come into play. Find out some of those experiments. Find out what is going on with some of these black kind of comm badges and so on. But as you say, we're halfway. There's so much to play with. I think Lorca and his previous experience on that ship that he sent to its doom, I think that's going to play an interesting role down the line. And I think there's just so many little things they played with. Even the Vulcans, these, I can't remember the name of it, logic extremists, I think that's going to be something we're going to see some more of as well. So there's certainly little things that have been peppered around that I'm quite curious to see where that'll go in sort of maybe the second half of the season and beyond. And I think the bridge crew, I'm looking forward to learning more a bit about them. We've got kind of some regular faces as well, and I'm looking forward to seeing these characters' stories as well. I think that'll be exciting to see that expanded upon as well.
Absolutely. I think, it's for what we think about what we have gone through in only 9 episodes, it has been quite a ride, and I think much more has happened, obviously, to characters and character development within these first 9 episodes than really the first 9 episodes of any previous Star Trek show because of the episodic nature of those shows. And so I want to know more about the people that are on the bridge. I want to see them on Star Trek missions. I want to see them boldly going where no one has gone before. Right now, the show has been kind of insular, which I think is another thing that leads me to this whole, is this the Prime Universe yet? Because we keep hearing about Andorians but not seeing them. I mean, really, the only species we've seen outside of the Pavans have been Vulcans, humans, and Klingons, and then, Saru as a representative of his people. And you're not really seeing any, too many other races except as kind of background characters.
And I think it's one of these ones that I think I share the same thing as well. I think that they've almost done it that sort of with the first kind of few episodes, all the equipment they've had to design, all the ships and the build, there's not much really kind of kicking around in the budget, even though what we're getting is a really high quality product. And I think probably more in that second half of the season. I almost think a lot of these shows are slightly bottle shows. They're all on existing sets that they spent a lot of money designing. We've only had really that one away mission. I think almost kind of quite nicely, I think the Klingon War is kind of quite well wrapped up almost to this stage. I expect that to sort of wrap up quite quickly now, and I think we'll start to see them exploring those strange new worlds and seeking out those new civilizations because the money is going to be there as well to maybe do that and go on location in Canada and places like that. That's what I'm potentially thinking might happen.
I think so. I mean, I think, my hope is I'd love to have the show go 5, 6, 7 years, however long they can go, and so there's a lot of stories to tell, and one of the nice things with it being on the streaming services is, they're not as constrained with the time format. So, I'm always amazed. Sitcoms in the U.S. We were watching a sitcom the other day that's on a major network, and it was 18 minutes and 22 seconds, and that was it. That was the sitcom. And so there was not a lot of story you can tell in 18 minutes and 22 seconds is a YouTube video. It's not a sitcom. And, that coming from, I'm growing up in a world where sitcoms were 27 minutes long. There was an extra 10 minutes a show. And, when you watch the original Star Trek, they went 50 minutes, 51 minutes. And, of course, as time goes, you get less and less show. One of the things I appreciate with Discovery is there's been episodes that skirt up close to, what you were seeing on TV. And, some dramas today in the U.S. anyway run 38 minutes. And with Discovery, there's been episodes that are pushing 45, 46 minutes, and it's almost like we're back 15 years ago, 20 years ago. You're getting more story.
I think there was an episode as well that was like 39 minutes and one that was 50. And when I saw the 39 minutes one episode when it was booting, I was like, 5 minutes less. But I kind of was like, I'm happy with that we've all heard the story as well. The episode came up short, so we kind of put in a few scenes here and there to build it up, and I'm kind of like that confidence of going, this is what the episode is, this is our best product, we don't really need to add anything to it, off it goes. If it needed to be 50 minutes, it would be 50 minutes. And I find that a confidence sign that the people are trusted and they don't just have to fill ads in anymore. It's all about what's the best product and putting out there.
Right, and we're learning. I mean, there are these little scenes that we're learning about our edits. That there's a scene with Tecumseh and a batleth on fire that was edited out, or a little bit of the conversation between Laurel and Admiral Cornwell was edited, and so they're still making these important editing decisions and saying this isn't necessary for the story. So they're not sort of abusing that privilege either, where they're just going, let's just put everything in that we filmed, because sometimes even a good scene need to be edited out. One of my favorite examples of that is in the original screenplay to Wrath of Khan, there was a saber fight. There was a face-to-face meeting between Kirk and Khan. And it happens on in the Genesis cave, and Khan before he beams up the Genesis torpedo, he beams himself down, and basically the scene plays out kind of similar, except the very end, to what happens in Star Trek 3. So the scene between Kruge and Kirk, where Kirk kind of taunts Kruge like, hey, you got to bring me up there, and Kruge is like, no, I'm coming down. That was in the Khan script, really. And Khan comes down, and they fight with old-fashioned sabers. The Khan chooses a weapon, and they fight with these old-fashioned sabers, and Kirk loses. But Khan strands him there as his punishment and leaves. So basically, you wind up in the same exact place you wind up in the movie now, but without an unnecessary fight scene, which you didn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it adds so much charm to the film that they never really do meet face. They're never in the same room together, and that just adds to the kind of submarine World War II fight feeling of the film, where they're kind of only dealing with each other remotely. And we would have never got the great Khan yell, right?
Yeah.
So the Khan scream became the emotional punch of that scene, and that was written because they had edited out the fight. They needed a kind of a resolution or a big moment there, and that's where the Khan scream comes in. So editing is always really such an important thing for the writer and also for them while they film. Star Trek II also had a much longer fight scene between Kirk and his son. In fact, you do see in the Khan movie poster, you see an image of Kirk's son with his knife over Kirk, and he's looking up, and who he's looking at is his mother, who comes in. Carol comes in at that point. He's looking at his mother. That wasn't a staged photograph just to put it on the poster. That was actually a moment from the film where they had filmed a longer fight scene that Kirk loses also. He loses to his son. And they really changed that fight scene and edited it down to just a couple of like a punch out of the hand of the knife, and they kind of like look at each other. And that was wise too, because you didn't need to have Kirk being defeated 1,000 times in the film before he starts winning. And it was kind of meant to show his age and all of that. And I think it would have been a little bit too much, and it would have extended the film in a way that was unnecessary. So I'm really happy that we're learning that there are deleted scenes in a way. One, because we can get to watch them maybe on Blu-ray releases.
Oh yeah, surely Blu-ray. Because if everyone's got the streaming service, you got to give someone an incentive to get the Blu-ray. And one thing I've loved about the Blu-rays have been the extensive behind-the-scenes documentaries, the retrospectives. So I'm really hoping when Discovery comes to Blu-ray, we get the same quality that we've been getting on all the Blu-rays now.
Yeah, I mean, I love when they bring on people like, Larry Nemecek or what they did with the Star Trek Blu-ray films, where they brought in, they had like Nicholas Meyer and others comment on the film together. They paired people together that I thought were interesting combinations of people to kind of comment on the films. That was great. You had Ira Stephen Bear, I think, even commented on the film. Those kinds of bonus features, I love them because they give us a chance to really, celebrate what the contributions are. We just finished watching all of the Star Trek Beyond, which we thought was a really underrated, fantastic Star Trek film.
Couldn't agree more.
I'm so disappointed it didn't kind of capture the audience box office wise that I think it deserved. Because everything about it was just, I thought, Star Trek to its core. And
what a tribute to Leonard Nimoy as well. I thought going into that movie they weren't going to acknowledge it, so it was a surprise on opening night when it became such a cornerstone and really poignantly done through the movie. And I thought, Star Trek Beyond, I'm going to go see it next year live at the Albert Hall here in London. They're bringing it here with a live audience and the live score. So I've been lucky to see the two previous J.J. Abrams movies in this 20,000 seater royal venue with the live orchestra. And people can criticize some of the movies rightly at points, or they've got their huge audience. But when you saw things like when Leonard Nimoy appeared, and you have this live audience applauding along, or when in Star Trek Into Darkness, when the Enterprise drops and comes out, and that raw audience reaction, the score swelling, I'm really excited to see Star Trek Beyond get that experience with a live audience and live score. I'm counting the days till next year already.
Oh, I'm so envious because I love Wrath of Khan. I love Star Trek. I love Star Trek Undiscovered Country. But in many ways, I place Star Trek Beyond. Not that I'm not a ranker too much. This is better than this kind of thing. But it's definitely one of my top 3 favorite films for sure. And I think a lot of that has to do with the heart and the soul of that film. I thought J-Lo was a fantastic character. It was also heartbreaking because of Anton Yelchin. Absolutely. And I don't know if it was by design. I'm pretty sure it was when they raised their glass at the end of the film to sort of absent friends or the friends who aren't with them. And that camera lands on Anton Yelchin. That is just a heartbreaking moment. And I thought a beautiful way to acknowledge, the loss of just somebody way too young. And Beyond I thought was really, really a great film. I hope they get a 4th film. And I'm actually, our son is really hopeful that they do a crossover. He wants to see, since obviously we can't do Leonard Nimoy with Michael, that opportunity is gone unless they use some kind of special effects technology. He wants to see a crossover between the Kelvin universe and this universe.
I'd love to see that. Whether CBS and Paramount agree to something like that, it's always when you've got to tell a kid like, that's a brilliant idea, but son, let me tell you about production problems and stuff. But
there's the problem, is the ownership rights. That's the problem.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me today, John. It's been such a pleasure. I've listened to you on other podcasts before, and I've always been enjoyed listening to you as a listener, and I feel like the same again tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. If people wanted to reach out to you on the internet or discover about your talks and read your writing, I know our very own Tristan Riddell from Chicago himself, he had mentioned he'd been to one of your talks and it was fantastic. And I know Mike Schindler, he's here on the Nerd Party Network as well. He's spoken very highly of your talks. Where can people kind of see these amazing events and find out more about the great work you do?
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, first of all, and asking my opinions on this. It's really a privilege to talk to fellow fans and to share this all again with fellow fans. It's Star Trek's a big part of my whole family's life, as it is with I think a lot of us, and to be able to connect with fans in any way, fellow fans, is always a big thrill. I'd love to talk with anybody and connect with anybody. A great way to get in touch with me is just through Twitter. If you just search for Tenuto Family, run it all together. It's a TENUTO Family together. That's kind of my wife and my account. And since we tend to write together and present together, we use that single account like that. So that's a great way to get in touch with us. In terms of talks, our talks are always free, and really the goal of them is to share rare pictures and rare information with fellow fans. We do a lot of them locally here in Illinois at local libraries. So if somebody wants to connect with us on Twitter, I can give you a list anytime we're doing a talk. But we also do talks for creation conventions, and both here locally, and we've done them in Las Vegas and Boston and wherever they're at. So people can watch for them at their local or the big official Star Trek conventions. We like to, we present there. We did 9 talks a couple years ago at one of the. Yeah, it was incredible.
Traded in gambling for doing some Star Trek talks. Well, that's a great self-restraint in Vegas.
Yeah, it was a good way not to have to worry about spending money because we were so busy. But that was great. One of them was incredible privilege. Myself, Larry Nemesek, and Adam Malin gave the kind of a sort of official Leonard Nimoy tribute at the Las Vegas convention, and that was for 5,000 people. I mean, that was the most amazing emotional experience that I've ever had and presenting. I mean, just to the crowd and everybody there, just to be sad together and to appreciate Leonard together and to love, and to express the love that we have for Star Trek and Leonard together. That was an amazing experience. So, and we've got some invitations out there right now. We might be doing something with the Star Trek tour people, things like that. So we do talks all over the place. So if anybody wants to shoot us an email or a message through Twitter or whatever, we're always happy to share that. We love really getting this information to fans and talking with fellow fans and learning from them. Some of our best resources have come from fans who have their own archives and databases and images and things like that. And so we just love sharing that and appreciate any chance we can to do that. And last but not least, we do write for StarTrek.com. So if anybody wants to check out we have a series of articles there. There's a whole 5 or 6 episode look at the making of Space Seed that's on there. That's a really nice in-depth look. We did a whole bunch of articles about newspapers and Star Trek. And last but not least, we're going to be on a Netflix TV show coming up in either December or January called The Toys That Made Us. And we have Star Trek collecting is a big thing for us, and I love looking at the history of that. And some of our talks are about the history of Star Trek collectibles and their role in Star Trek production history and all of that. And so that's a new show that's coming out. And one of the episodes is going to be all about Star Trek toys. And they're doing Star Wars toys and Transformers and Barbies. And they're looking at the toys that have been important culturally around the world. and it should be a great show. So we're looking forward to that too.
Absolutely, we'll be happy. We'll put a lot of these links in our show notes, and we'll be putting that up on our Twitter and Facebook pages as well. When you've got any of your tours and shows coming up, we're happy to share that with anyone. So thanks again, John, for joining me. It's been an absolute honour, and I hope you continue to go boldly in this great many talks you do.
You too, and thank you. Thanks for inviting us, and live long and prosper, everyone.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd